You open Claude this morning, you sent maybe 2 or 3 messages, and then boom, you've reached your usage limit. And you're sitting there thinking, I'm paying $20 a month for this. What is going on? Here's the truth: Claude didn't cut you off because you used too much. Claude cut you off because you have been using it the wrong way, and nobody has explained to you exactly how it's working in the back scene and what you need to understand about Claude usage and Claude tokens. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly how Claude's limit system works. I'm going to explain to you what tokens are, the differences between inputs versus output tokens, the common mistakes that beginners and other Claude users do whenever they use Claude, and the common best practices you should apply from now in order to avoid getting your usage limits often. First of all, we must clearly understand what a token actually is. So, what is a token? A token is simply the base fundamental unit of communication between Claude and human beings, or Claude and natural language. Whenever you send a text to Claude, the message you send or whatever Claude gives you back is not actually the written English you see. Every time you send a message to Claude, the message or each and every word in the message is actually converted into tokens, which are bits of chunks or chunks of words. For example, a token could be three quarters of a word, half of a word, or a simple comma or a simple dash. So each and every time you send a message to Claude, all the message is actually converted into tokens that can be understandable by Claude, and you have a certain limit of tokens whenever you use Claude. So each time Claude gets your or reads a message from you, it's actually burning some tokens, and each time it sends you a message, it's actually also burning tokens. So there's basically two types of tokens, or two different instances when tokens are actually used. So there's input tokens and there's output tokens. As the names imply, input tokens is simply the tokens that are used at input. So whenever you send a message to Claude or you upload your invoice from your company or your payroll or any PDF, is actually converted and into Claude language, and tokens are burned. The same thing for output tokens. Everything Claude sends out to you, be it a message, a guide, Canva PDFs, or anything that gets out of Claude into your conversation or whatever interface you're using to communicate with Claude, uses output tokens. Now, let's talk about the mistakes that most beginners and Claude users make whenever they have conversations with Claude or whenever they use Claude AI. So, the first mistake is actually having extremely long conversations. So, when you have unnecessarily long conversations, that is the fastest way you can burn all your Claude tokens. Since you understand what tokens are, it will be easy for you to understand why it's bad to have extremely long conversations with Claude. So whenever you start a conversation with Claude, tokens are used at input for the whole conversation. So if you start a conversation with Claude about how you do groceries tonight, and the whole conversation is, I don't know, maybe 5 pages long, each and every message you send to Claude actually prompts Claude to start reading from the start of a conversation to the end and use all of those information as input. So the longer the messages you send to Claude in the same conversation, the longer your input actually becomes, and the more tokens are going to be burned in order to process your input and actually have Claude understand what you're doing. So if you are in a conversation about the groceries you're going to do at night, and you want another new conversation about how you're going to build a web app, I would recommend you actually stop whatever you're doing in the actual conversation and open a new session and a new chat session to actually start the conversation from afresh, in order to avoid burning all your tokens each and every time you send a new message, especially if the new message has nothing to do with what you said earlier. The second most common mistake that burns your Claude tokens is sending unnecessary documents to Claude. For example, I've seen people wanting just a bit of a summary in a simple text or a simple PDF. For example, they have some class notes and they want Claude to explain one paragraph from the class notes. And what they do is, instead of just uploading the particular paragraph they want Claude to analyze, they upload the whole PDF they have about the class notes. Now, what you forget is that when you upload this PDF to Claude and you tell it to analyze a particular paragraph in it, it doesn't. directly go to the paragraph and ignores everything else. It actually reads everything that is in the document. And by reading everything that is in the document, you understand what I mean in terms of tokens, since you understand it now. So the whole document is read, meaning tokens are burned, reading a whole document while you just wanted summary or information about a particular paragraph in the document. So the larger the document you leave to Claude, the more tokens are going to be burned unnecessarily just for Claude to give you simple analysis or simple answers based on a particular paragraph you uploaded in the whole PDF. Now, one of the most important mistakes that burn your tokens the fastest is uploading entire files to Claude. So when you go to Claude and you upload entire files like PDF documents that are 200 to 300 pages, or class notes 30 to 40 pages, or Excel sheets, or your entire code base, or images, an unimaginable amount of Claude input tokens are burned, and you can't even understand how serious that is. So you want to avoid as much as possible uploading large files to Claude. This is the worst mistake you can ever make, and this is the worst way you can ever burn your Claude tokens in one session without even Claude having formulated a right response or a correct answer to get you back. So now another important mistake that burns your Claude tokens is giving Claude vague prompts, giving Claude unspecific prompts. So what happens is when you give prompts that are not specific to Claude, it gives you answers you don't need. It gives you answers you don't care about. It gives you answers that are probably poor and don't align with what you want from Claude. So if you go maybe to Claude and you're unspecific and you say, give me a method to do $30,000 this month, Claude is going to generate you a response, and based on what you understand about output tokens, some tokens are going to be burned in order for Claude to give you a response to that vague prompt. So when Claude is going to give you a response about how to make your first $30 in a about making your first $30,000 in a month, it's probably not going to be the answer you expected. So you're going to tell Claude to give you a different answer, and you're still going to be vague again in the second prompt. And Claude is going to generate something else, which most probably won't be what you actually expect from Claude. So a series of actually repeating bad and vague prompts to Claude again and again and again actually is wasting your tokens, because each time Claude is giving you an answer, it's actually using output tokens and burning them all. And if you keep doing this for 5 to 6 to 7 times with bad prompts and vague prompts and unspecific prompts, you're gonna end up with a lot of tokens burned without you having done anything useful with your Claude usage limit for the day or for the 5 hours that you have. So here are the best practices you can have when having your conversations with Claude to make sure your tokens are actually used efficiently and that Claude makes a lean use of your actual Claude tokens. So the first thing is to be extremely specific in your prompts. When you want to ask Claude about any question, make sure you give it as much details as possible. As a matter of fact, the best way to have conversations with Claude is not actually to prompt Claude, but prompt Claude to actually ask you questions, to have minute details, and to have curated specific points about you that are going to make your answers Claude get you exactly relevant to what you're asking. So if you're asking Claude for making 30,000 a month, make sure you also give Claude details or context about everything which is around making that 30,000 in a month. You can give context like your skills. You can give details like the town in which you live, everything that has to do with you. Or if you're not confident about that, give Claude the prompt to actually ask you questions so that the prompting to actually get the response from Claude is going to be specific and efficient. In that way, Claude is not going to repeatedly give you responses which are bad and which do not align with what you have. And in that way, your tokens stay intact and you don't waste anything unnecessarily. Another best practice for Claude token savings is actually to use Claude conversations with narrow focus. What I mean by this is to use Claude conversations for a particular topic, for an exact topic. For example, if you go to a new conversation in Claude AI and type how to make my first $30,000 a month, Make sure that all out through that conversation, you actually talk about making just the $30,000 in a month and nothing else. Because if you talk about something that has nothing to do with making $30,000 a month, you already know what's going to happen. Claude is not going to answer your second prompt or your second topic based just off your second topic. Because if you have been using a Claude conversation, which was very long, having details about how to make $30,000 in a month, and then you ask Claude uh, a prompt, or you ask Claude a question about how to cook rice in your house, Claude is not only going to read your prompt and answer you about the rice, it's going to read all through the entire conversation you have had before about the $30,000 from the beginning to the end. And that's going to burn all your input tokens just for Claude to give you answers about the second topic you discussed within the same conversation window or within the same conversation session with Claude. So make sure for each conversation you have with Claude, it is for a particular purpose and a particular topic. If you want to switch topics, make sure you start a new Claude conversation and save your tokens. Another common best practice is to avoid uploading documents to Claude. Now, if you ideally have a document, a PDF, an Excel sheet, or whatever you want to submit to Claude, the best thing to do is actually to go to ChatGPT, which is generally linear and much more easy on tokens, and upload the file to ChatGPT, whether it's PDF, Excel, or whatever, and ask ChatGPT to turn it into a Markdown file or a JSON file. So you just go to ChatGPT with your document, paste your document in ChatGPT, and ask it to turn it into a Markdown file or a JSON file for easier readability for Claude. So you now get the Markdown file or the JSON file that was generated by ChatGPT and paste into Claude for analysis. That's the best approach for reading documents or large documents or PDFs or anything which is not plain words or simple text in Markdown files that Claude can understand faster and actually process without burning all your input tokens. So that's all for this actual video. I hope it was genuinely helpful. Throughout this video, you have learned exactly what Claude tokens are, the difference between inputs and output tokens, and how they are interrelated, and the common mistakes that most beginners and Claude users do whenever they have conversation in Cloud. And most importantly, you are able to learn the best practices in using Claude. Make sure you actually apply them in your day-to-day life while using Claude, and be very serious about them. In this way, you're going to save your Claude tokens and avoid hitting your usage limits while you're mid through your conversation with Claude, and actually wasting all your workflow and your productive time while working with Claude. If this video was helpful, make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video to people out there who are still making the common mistakes we discussed today, so that they can avoid them and everyone can save on Cloud tokens. Stay blessed.